Yeah, very good. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, we're going to begin looking at the whole idea of how do you communicate it with marketing strategy? How do you get the consumers to know that your product exists? How do you get them to buy your product? What kind of things do you have to do in order to get it, to convince them to take out their wallet and spend product? Let's see. I just want to admit Sammy Abiev. Okay. And there's what we call the whole concept of integrated marketing communication, where we carefully blend the mix of promotion tools together. And you can see that we have advertising, which you're probably familiar with, sales promotion, you may be familiar with that as well, and we'll discuss that a little bit more. The whole concept of direct marketing, you know, all that fourth class mail that fills up your mailbox or all the spam you seem to be getting on your internet. The idea of public relations, where you're just trying to make a good name for yourself, that so when consumers look at your logo, they have good feelings about you. And the whole concept of personal selling, the salesperson who actually speaks to you and tries to convince you to buy that particular product. So it's all carefully blended, and the major companies are very sophisticated in the way they handle this. Let's talk about a promotion strategy. We have what we call the push strategy versus the pull promotion strategy. And it's important to understand the differences between these two. So there's a strategy where the producer generally makes a fairly sophisticated product. Let me just see if somebody else wants to come in right now. Okay, we have a few more people who are joining the lecture. Then I'm going to close the door in a few minutes. A sophisticated product might need what we call a push strategy, where the producer hires people who go out and actively sell the product aggressively, knowing all the features of the product to either the wholesaler or the retailing company, and maybe even the consumer. So if you're going to Best Buy, you might find there's a salesperson on the floor who is being paid with a commission, and that salesperson is going to try and get you to buy the most expensive television, of course, that's out there. And that salesperson is going to share with you all of the features of that particular product, that particular television set, for example, and convince you to buy it. And that person has been trained by the manufacturer to discuss all of the features and has been trained in marketing techniques, including hypnosis, by the way, and will try and get you to buy that expensive product and get as much of the share of your wallet as they possibly can. That's a push strategy. By the way, I want you to see, I'm wearing my Zicklin shirt today in honor of you guys, 100 years. Let's see, I think somebody else wants to come in. Okay. So that's the push strategy. Then we have what we call the pull strategy. And the pull strategy is a little bit different. And this is one that you're very familiar with. Through consumer advertising and sales promotion, and they're advertising on the TV and they're advertising on the internet, you're going to buy Coca-Cola, or you're going to buy M&Ms. You're going to buy things that don't require a lot of interpersonal contact. And there, the producer will go out of his way or her way to create an advertising mix that will entice you without having to go through an aggressive sales strategy with hiring people, know all the features, etc., to get you to buy the product. So you generally don't see a Coca-Cola representative ringing your doorbell. You open the door and they discuss all the fine features of Coca-Cola and why you should be buying Coca-Cola as opposed to Pepsi-Cola. What you might see someday, well, not so much now, but in the old days, in the 1930s, vacuum cleaner salesmen would come to the home, ring the doorbell. The people at home would open the door, and the vacuum cleaner salesperson would say, here's my vacuum cleaner, and this is why my vacuum cleaner has superior features, and you should buy it today. That would
Professor,
be a push strategy. Yeah, question.
one of my friends texted me and they said that they've been waiting for a long time in the session and you didn't let them in.
I've admitted everybody in. There's only 3 people. Actually, everybody's in who's applied to get in. So whoever that was should be in the session right now. Who's that person?
Ty, Ty.
Last name, Ty?
No, first name.
What's last name?
Bahadur.
Bahadur.
I'm sorry, what's the last name?
Bahadur.
I don't even see it on the list. I didn't see, maybe he couldn't sign in. No, I don't see anybody by that name, either in the waiting room or on the list. So I don't know what the problem is. Don't have to try again to log in again.
Okay.
So you see the difference between the push strategy and the pull strategy. The push strategy relies on interpersonal connection, trained salespeople trying to sell you a product. The pull strategy, there's an advertising and promotion sales campaign where they're trying to get you to be pulled into buying the product, be pulled into buying Coca-Cola, be pulled into buying M&Ms, okay? Another good example for a push strategy is airlines. Aircraft, selling aircraft to airlines. Boeing and Airbus are the two oligopolists that own the passenger aircraft industry, the large passenger aircraft industry. They hire very sophisticated engineers to call on the airlines, who also have very sophisticated engineers, to try and discuss with them all the benefits of buying either a Boeing or an Airbus. Okay, I'm allowing a few people to come in. There's one person who's trying to come in. Now it's time for me to lock the door because it's a time to do that. Let's see. So I'm going to lock the meeting now. So if somebody hasn't come in by now, they'll have to look at it online. So we have the push strategy where it's very sophisticated, sell to very sophisticated. And you can understand why just advertising on television for Boeing to buy, for United Airlines to buy a Boeing aircraft isn't really the right way to sell that. And I like to give the example of a friend of mine who worked for Mitsubishi Industries. And his job was to sell uranium to the utilities in Japan. And the utilities in Japan had long-term contracts, 10-year contracts. So his job was for 10 years to take the people at the utilities out to dinner, wine them and dine them, and tell why his uranium was better than his competitor's uranium. And he would do that every year for 10 years, trying to make sure that they stayed loyal to his company, to Mitsubishi Industries uranium business. And at the end of 10 years, the contract would generally be renewed because he had used all of his efforts to encourage these people, legal efforts, by the way, to encourage these people to continue to buy Mitsubishi Industries uranium. It was a very sophisticated sales pitch that he used to do that. Again, a pull strategy, you go to the supermarket, you buy Mr. Clean. Nobody's showing it at your door to tell you to buy Mr. Clean. They do advertising and promotion that can pull you to the shelf to purchase the product. Push versus pull. So how do you put together an advertising campaign? Well, there's a process here that's worth taking a look at. The first thing you're doing is setting your objectives. So you're going to communicate your objectives, what are your communications objectives and your sales objectives. Okay, again, the sales objectives will drive what communication objectives you had. The next thing you have to think about are the budget decisions. How much can you afford to spend on advertising? Often it's a percentage of sales. So a company might say, if it's something which advertising makes a big difference to, they might say, we'll do 25% of our sales to get this message out there that we have this product, which is very desirable. If it's a commodity type product like nails, they may say 0, we're not going to advertise for our nails. Or if it's something which is almost commodity like Morton salt, they may say, well, okay, we'll spend 2% of our revenues. So, and they also look at what their competitors are doing. So if their competitors are spending a lot on advertising, they may feel compelled to spend a lot on advertising. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. It's only recently, actually, that Apple and Amazon have actually engaged in television advertising. Up until a year or so ago, we never saw them doing television advertising. It's only in the last few years that they've decided to do that. Then you have to think about, well, what are the message decisions that we're trying to send? You have to have a strategy, and you have to have a way to execute that messaging strategy. So you might want to say, my strategy is to show that the Apple iOS system is superior to the Android system. And how are they going to execute that strategy? Well, they're going to have to think of media. How do they get the word out there? So they're going to say, okay, what type of media do we want to use? In the last century, they used a lot of newspaper, magazine ads. They used a lot of radio ads, and of course, television advertising. Today, you still see a lot of television advertising, much less radio advertising. The newspapers are generally going under because of the changes in technology, but you're seeing a lot more internet advertising that's going on right now. And then once you've set up the strategy, you're going to consistently and continuously evaluate, is the sales activity successful? If you're spending all of this money making all this advertising, you want to make sure that it's having some impact on sales. So you should have set some sales objectives when you've created this advertising strategy. And if you're not meeting those objectives, you better ask a question, why is that not happening? Why am I not selling more Apple phones? Or why is Amazon not selling more product? They say, well, maybe our advertising has to be retuned. Maybe we have to fire our advertising agency because they're not doing the job right, and we'll just bring our own people who work in-house to do the advertising. So these are the kinds of decisions that they have to make in advertising. And of course, there are new advertising challenges that are out there. We have the internet, which didn't exist really up until the late 90s. And it's really only since the early aughts that you saw a significant amount of advertising happen on the internet. Now, for you folks, you're all young and you've grown up with this. But for people like me, we're still shocked to see how this transition happened and how it's happened so quickly, how it's driven most of the newspapers in the United States out of business, closed most of the magazines that existed out of business, because the newspapers and the magazines lived by their advertising, not necessarily by their subscriptions. So we see this new advertising challenge is to get the product online and get the eyeballs to take a look at the product. How do they do that? They have to create advertising strategies in order to do that. Now let's talk about sales promotion. Advertising is one thing. You want to get it into the hands of the customer. So you want to deliver the message to the customer. But you also will use other tools, and sales promotion is one of those other tools. And with sales promotion, you create short-term incentives to get you to purchase the product. So you're very familiar, I'm sure, with Memorial Day sales or President's Day sales, Martin Luther King Day sales, anything that can do to generate a 3-day weekend where you might be able to go to the stores or go online and buy a product. They want to generate as much as they can in as short a time as possible. And they generally do this by actively promoting something. So you might see there's a 3-day 20% off mattresses. And you say, well, that's good. I was thinking of buying a mattress sometime in the next 6 months. They're giving me 20% off if I go this weekend to buy the mattress. I'll take advantage of that sales promotion to get me to go out there. And you've seen a rapid increase in the promotion industry in recent years because there's just this tremendous pressure to increase current sales. Part of that is due to the fact that there's tremendous pressure by Wall Street to look at quarterly earnings, and quarterly earnings are a function of quarterly sales. And if you're just lollygagging along and not doing what you can to create your current sales, then it's going to have an impact on your profits. So they're trying to increase their current sales. Another reason is there's just tremendous competition, especially on the internet. It's very easy for you to compare prices. It's very easy for you to compare products. That wasn't always the case years ago. So they didn't feel compelled to have as many sales promotions as we have today. The other thing is there's declining advertising efficiency. And what do I mean by that? Well, you're getting bombarded by so many advertising messages every day that the marginal return on those messages, the actual impact that it has on you, declines because there's just too many of them for you to accept and understand and incorporate into your sales decisions. And finally, and I alluded to this just a moment ago, there are more deal-oriented consumers. You're smart enough now to wait because you know a sales promotion is coming up. You know that there's end-of-season sales promotions. You know that there's 3-day weekend sales promotions. And so if you really want something, you want to get it at a good price, you're willing to wait. You know, in some countries, it's illegal to have sales promotions. The government only allows sales promotions twice a year. For example, in France, you're not allowed to put something on sale whenever you want to do it. You have to keep full retail price, except for summer sales in, I believe it's July, and winter sales, which is after Christmas. The rest of the time, you're not allowed to put things on sale because they say it's anti-competitive, and it will put many of the smaller retailers out of business. But in this country, anything goes. And just give you some examples of sales promotion. Understand, whenever you see a circular like this is created with a lot of thought and intent by the people who are putting this together. Everything from the colors, notice the red, the white, and the blue. This is a Veterans Day sales promotion, I believe. Yeah, Veterans Day. See, promo code is Vets Day. Veterans Day sale. Shop now. Terrific savings. This is all done to catch your eye, to create an image in your mind so that you will feel compelled to go out and take advantage of this sales promotion that's going on. So what do they have? An in-store savings pass. They let you print it. You can shop the catalog, find the store. Estee Lauder is going to pay extra money to be showcased on this. So you'll get your 19-piece collection for only $55. A 2-day special saves 60% on down comforters. This is all very carefully managed. Here's another sales promotion, Super Sunday for Super Bowl, extra 20% off. Again, you know, it's pretty cool by what they're doing here. And again, it's very carefully conceived. They want you to go out and take advantage of their sales so they can promote those sales, get as much sales as possible in that short 2 to 3 day weekend. CVS, I get these ads in the mail all the time. They clog up my mailbox. I also get them on my internet, in my email all the time, but they're very effective. I go to CVS frequently. They give me 20% off coupons or $5 off coupons, and I use them. And I think I'm getting a good deal. Am I getting a good deal? I don't know, probably not, because their retail prices are probably more expensive than the retail prices at other competitive places. But I feel like I'm getting a good deal, so their promotions are very successful. They're getting more share of my wallet, and it works. Then we move on to something called public relations. So we've discussed advertising, we've discussed promotions. What is public relations? Public relations is simply building a good image of the company in your mind. They want to build up a good corporate image. And that's helpful when companies might have problems in the future, for example, unfavorable rumors, stories, and events. For years, there was a German chemical company, BASF, huge German chemical company. Harmeet, I see you raised your hand. Harmeet, you want to unmute yourself? Harmeet? I see your hand raised, but I can't hear you. Hold on a moment. Hold on, I'll see if I can unmute you. This is not alphabetical.
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, sorry. So Jonathan Siegelben, he got kicked out and now he can't get back into the class.
Yeah, that's a problem. I can't get people back in once they've been kicked out.
Oh, so he can't join the class?
Is this going to happen the entire class?
Yeah, there's, as far as I can tell, there's not a way to do that. Let me just check. But I'm pretty sure I can't do that.
Okay, thank you.
But let me just see. Okay, he can come in now. I unlocked the meeting, so he can try and come in now. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
So if you get any messages that students have been locked out, let me know, and I can temporarily unlock the class and let them back in. So BASF, I was saying, this chemical company, nobody's ever heard of them. It's a German chemical company. They don't sell any products that anybody but another chemical company or plastics manufacturer or somebody who uses plastics in manufacturing would buy. But they were advertising all the time on CNBC. So why are they doing that? They have very little presence in this country. There's no retail products that you can buy. There aren't even wholesale products you can buy. They're a direct business-to-business company that sells sophisticated chemicals and plastics. They were doing that to build up an image for themselves so that they become known a little bit within the American community. They wanted shareholders in America, that's why they're advertising on CNBC, to know that they existed. And maybe one day, if American companies were looking to buy shares, they would then be prepared to, let's see, Lawrence Flores, they would be prepared to buy shares in BASF stock. So it's just trying to create some kind of an image for the company. And here's a good example, the New York City Marathon. Who sponsors the New York City Marathon? Well, United Airlines, ING, Foot Locker, you're seeing the names here. Why are they doing this? It just increases a positive image in the eyes of the consumer.
I'm not gonna try to my life like that ever again.
Somebody's talking right now.
Well, I guess. You can't remember it. You have a point. I'm gonna sit over there. Oh, fuck.
Okay, I had some people were loud, so I muted everybody. So the public, you see the New York Marathon, what are they? They're trying to build up a positive image of themselves. And it works. So you will, in your mind, be watching the New York City Marathon, and at an unconscious level, you'll see these names associated with the New York Marathon. And when you think of these names, you'll feel a little bit better about them than you might otherwise think about them. And they give thought as to whether they want to be sponsors of the New York City Marathon, whether they want this public relations. They're anticipating that it's going to have a payoff for them. We talked a little bit about the sales force and how you need a sales force if you're using a push strategy. So let's talk a little bit about what a sales force is. Well, for one thing, it's two-way personal communication between salespeople and customers. So the salesperson is trying to establish a relationship with you. So if you go into, again, Best Buy to buy a television set, or if you go into the Gap because you want to buy a pair of jeans and you're working with a salesperson, that salesperson has been trained to try and get you to buy merchandise. Some of you may have worked in a store where you have been a sales force person, and you probably know some of the training that you might be able to get to help people buy the product. And what they do, they'll also often probe the customers to learn about the problems. Why do you want to buy a new television? Well, I only have a 32-inch screen and I just moved into a larger apartment and it needs a 48-inch screen. Or I have one of those old-fashioned CRT television sets that I got from my grandmother and it broke and I think I'd rather get a new modern set. So those are the problems. The salesperson hears those problems and then they adjust their marketing offers to fit your needs. Depending on the product, you might be able to be in a strong negotiating position. So for example, if you're the US government and you're buying ventilators for hospitals, you have a lot of marketing force because you can buy a lot of ventilators at one time and you can tell the manufacturers that you're going to set the price for them. But if you're just New York State and you're trying to buy these ventilators, you don't have the same clout that the US government has, so you won't be as capable of negotiating the price with the ventilator manufacturer as the US government would have, because there's only 25 million people in New York State and there are 330 million people in the United States, and that gives the United States government more negotiating power than New York State. The salesperson will try and build long-term personal relationships with the customer. And I gave you the example of my friend who was selling uranium to the Japanese utilities. He was trying to build long-term relationships with the Japanese utilities, right? So what's the critical link between the company and the customers? Well, first of all, the salesperson is representing the company to the customers. As far as you're concerned, that person is the company. That salesperson at Best Buy to you is Best Buy. And also, and this is important as well, the salesperson is representing the customers to the company. So the salesperson may go back to the company, may go back to his boss at Best Buy or her boss at Best Buy and say, look, these television sets are not selling. They just don't have the critical features that the customer wants, and you ought to know about this. Because if you don't know about this, you're not going to sell as many television sets. You're going to want to now change some of the specifications on your television sets so that it meets the needs and the desires of the customer. And as we talked about frequently, the ultimate goal is to satisfy your customer. You want to delight your customer. You want to exceed the customer's expectations. That's the whole job of the salesperson. Get the units sold, make the customer happy, develop that long-term relationship so that you get not only the commission today, but you'll get future commissions. What about direct marketing? Well, direct marketing is where the customer develops, or the company develops a direct relationship with the individual. And to me, a really good example of that is Amazon. Amazon, up until very recently, never had a retail store. They did all their marketing online to the consumer, directly to the consumer. No television commercials. It was just direct to you. You knew you could buy books from Amazon. You ordered the books from Amazon, and they would come to you. Amazon would send you emails about new books that were coming out. You might click on them, see the new books. You might see other things that you wanted to buy, and you buy those other books. Then they expanded their range into a whole lot of different product areas, and they just did a remarkable job doing that. And what they did is they developed that direct relationship between you and the company. There's no wholesalers, there's no retailers, there's just you and Amazon. Now, some firms use direct marketing now as a supplemental medium for them. For example, a lot of the brick and mortar companies have said, wait a minute, we really can't compete in the new world with just brick and mortar. We have to go direct marketing, whether we like it or not. And so you'll see CVS, which we just referred to before as a good example. They have a lot of brick and mortar, but if you're a CVS customer, you're going to receive frequent emails from CVS, and they are going to be telling you about all kinds of offers that they have for you. Just letting in my friend Xu Jingyang. So again, for some companies, it's the only approach, like Amazon. And again, this is the marketing model that's now becoming increasingly popular as people realize that if you don't do direct marketing, you're going to lose a lot of sales potential. Your competitors are doing it, and if they're doing it and you're not, you're going to have trouble. Now, some companies just have trouble doing that. For some reason, they just can't get their websites tuned properly. And a good example of that is Bed Bath & Beyond. They have very successful brick and mortar stores, but they've just been incapable, from my personal point of view, of really developing a good direct marketing model that works for them. Macy's has a reasonable working model. Walmart has a great working model. Target has a great working model. And various companies have various successes, various failures at doing this. The banks are another good example where they're going direct marketing. In the past, you had to really go to your banker to get offered new loan opportunities and to find out what's going on. Today, through direct marketing, they can catch you, tell you what's being offered, and you can contact them directly online. Okay, we're going to shift gears big time now. Okay, we're going to discuss information technology and the current trends in information technology. So we're finished with advertising and promotion, sales. We're going to look at information technology. And in particular, we're going to be looking at big data analytics, and related to that, the security associated with big data analytics. So what's big data all about? Well, now with the advent of the internet and the evolution of the internet to where it stands today, we've got massive amount of information that have been acquired by companies, by the government, by just about everybody out there. Massive amounts of information. And a lot of that information is out there, and nobody knows consciously how to put all this information together and correlate it. And sometimes you'll find that there are relationships between pieces of information that you would never expect. And I'll get into that in a moment. So where do we stand right now? Well, we have what we call ERP, and this is at the customer level, and the customer enterprise relational management. This is at the customer level. At the customer level, you buy something, you get a receipt. They hand you the receipt, and they have a copy of the receipt in their computer. And they knew what you bought, when you bought, and how much you paid. Then you have customer relations management. And there we segment the market. We offer all kinds of details on the customer, what the customer likes, what the customer doesn't like, and various ways to access the customer. And all of this is available on the web. And remember all those cookies that you're agreeing to accept? A lot of this is associated with the CRM. And then you have the web itself. And if you're a company on a web, you can do all kinds of different things. For example, you can put out 27 messages to 100,000 people. Each of those 27 messages is slightly different. They might have slightly different wording. And you're going to see whether the messages have different impact on sales depending on the type of wording that's being used. When I was working at the Motley Fool, that's what we did all the time. We would send out slightly revised messages. So we might say, hey, now's a good time to buy, or this is a very interesting time to buy. Send them out to 100,000 people, see the impact on sales. Was there a statistically significant difference between the two sales levels? You say, well, if one worked better than the other, then let's accept the one that worked. Then, of course, there's ways to get your story out using affiliated networks, search marketing. We can target behavior. People who like to watch sports, they'll get some kind of a marketing message. People who like to buy things on Etsy will get another marketing message. So there's all kinds of ways of getting those. And the net result of all this is big data. And big data captures data from everywhere. For example, from sensors, from RFID devices, from your GPS, where you are, what's going on, from various feeds. You're on television, whether you like it or not, as you walk down the street. All this information is out there. And all of it is available somehow, somewhere in the public domain. Some of it we're not entitled to have access to. For example, face recognition technology that the police might use in an airport is something that we might not have access to. But there are other things that we might have access to. A supermarket owner has access to all the people walking up and down the aisles, and they can see what the consumer is touching, what the consumer is picking up and buying, looking at the looks on their face, how they're responding to the music being played in the supermarket. It's very sophisticated. And all of this is data analytics. And again, the amount of data that's out there is growing exponentially. And over time, you're going to see this continue. And there's a whole science that's evolving around this. And the science offers all of you, because you're young and this is a really new science, tremendous opportunity if you want to go into the data analytic industry. When we look at the data, there are the 4 V's of big data that we look at. And, I like to talk about the 4 P's. And I said you should probably remember the 4 P's for the exam. These are the 4 V's. And you should probably look at the 4 V's for the exam. So let's go over them. The first is volume. There's tremendous amount of volume out there, and it's growing exponentially, as I said. And it's coming from all different sources which we might not even think about. For example, satellites in space are looking down at Walmart parking lots to see what's being bought in the Walmart parking lot, or how many cars are parked in the Walmart parking lots, and what people are pulling out with their carriages in the Walmart parking lot. Then there's the velocity, an analysis of streaming data. What's going on Facebook right now? What are people on Facebook saying about United Airlines flights from Florida being late? What are they learning from that kind of information? There's just all the sensors that are out there. Who's passing through the TSA area? There's just massive amounts of information in real time coming out very quickly. Then there's the volume of data, just massive amount of volumes, as I discussed. And here you can see, look at the exponential growth of Twitter tweets per day. This is through January 2012. Today, it's many times that level because it's exponential growth. And again, velocity is very quick, analyzing, again, the Twitter posts, analyzing the video streams. What's trending on YouTube? Very important for advertisers to understand what's trending on YouTube. Then there's the variety of sources. And again, we've looked at some of the variety, social media, mobile data, machine-to-machine information, the database systems. You're being followed around all the time when you ever go into a supermarket, whenever you go into just about any store. And then there are just massive amounts of databases. And what you're trying to do is extract knowledge, extract insights from all the pieces of information that's out there. How do you do that? Well, there are a number of very complex algorithms for doing that. And I think I've given you the example. If not, I'll give it, if I did, I'm going to give it to you again anyway, where Target, the superstore Target, was able to agglomerate all the information about purchases that they were getting and was able to determine what women were pregnant before the women announced it to anybody else. And then Target would send out flyers to these women's homes, advertising all kinds of special promotions for baby products, whether it's diapers or baby lotion or whatever. And again, how did they do that? Because they took all this information that they had and they were able to figure that out. Let's see, a lot of people keep falling out of the class. The other thing you have to worry about is the veracity of the data. Is it true? Is it reliable? For example, what is the quality of data that we're getting on COVID-19 virus right now? Can we really rely upon the data that we're getting out of China or out of Iran, as the president suggested the other day? The data that we're getting on testing, are those tests reliable or not? I've heard stories that the tests that were coming from other parts of the world were only 50% reliable. Oh, do you want to make a decision about whether you have COVID virus on a 50-50 chance that you do or you don't? What's the use of getting tested? You want to have good data. So you want to have tests that work. You want to have something that's 90% certain. Maybe you won't get to 100%, but if the test says 90% certain that you have COVID-19 and you do the test twice and it again comes up certain, you're pretty sure that you have COVID-19 virus. So you want to make sure that you have real data that's coming out there. You want to see where the level, where the data is coming from. Is it timely data? Is it complete data? Is it consistent with other pieces of data that you're seeing? Is it reliable data? So you want to worry tremendously about the veracity of data. And that's a big problem right now because there are a lot of fake things going on out there. For example, on Facebook, are the posts that you're seeing true? How much fake news is there on Facebook? How many false posts are there? What have the Russians tried to do that have upset our understanding of politics or of the coronavirus or whatever? You have to be sure that the data that you're looking at is factual and that it's reliable. So let's go back to the big V's. Oops. Volume, the velocity, the variety of data, and the veracity of the data. We know there's a lot of data out there. We know a lot of the data is moving very quickly, and there are lots of sources of data. But is it true? Is the data that we're seeing true? And if it's not true, then you're going to have all kinds of problems, and you can't trust the other three, right? So where do you apply big data? Well, actually, you can apply big data just about everywhere. And here are just a couple of examples. And if you want to, you can go to this website and see how you can use analytics to understand learning. So improving student performance. So looking at graduation rates, faster completion of college, getting college degrees, etc. Healthcare, right now, we're looking at this in real time right now. Improving the diagnosis accuracy, we're talking about that. Public health, how certain we are about the spreading of the disease, the tracing of the disease, identifying new drugs to help with the disease. We need a new vaccine. We're going to use big data, big testing to come up with vaccines. We're using big data to come up with an understanding of what drugs or drug combinations might be useful. We're looking at all of this right now. Today, for example, the state of New York is beginning to test for people's antibodies. And they're using big data to use those tests. They're going to be sampling thousands of New York State residents using some of these antibody tests to see what the rate of people who have been infected with the COVID virus is in New York State. And they said, we'll have the information released by next week. Financial services. You want to identify, again, your customers, how many are coming in, how many are leaving. You're going to segment them by the profitability, how long they've been customers. So a lot of things that you're going to look at. You're going to look at things that you might not even think about. For example, looking at the internal emails of the people who are working with you and seeing what is satisfaction of the relationships with the bank among both the employees, but among the customers as well. There's just infinite numbers of things that you can look at when you're thinking about the big data applications. And it's become a real science. And Baruch is actually on the forefront of this big science, and there are degrees being offered in big data here at the university. Now let's talk about business intelligence versus big data. There's a big difference between the two of them. So business intelligence helps you find answers to the questions you already know. For example, how many cars am I selling this quarter? Well, you know how many cars you're selling this quarter throughout, for example, you're Ford and you want to know throughout the entire Ford retail system. Remember, Ford has independent retail dealers with whom they have a relationship. And so they'll contact all their dealers every month and they'll find out the answers to the questions they want to know. So each dealer will upload to Ford the number of cars and the make of the cars that they sold every month. And they'll capture the data, those dealers will capture it at the transaction level when it happens. So Ford can see in real time when a car is sold, where it happened, when it happened, and what was sold. And these are questions they already know to ask. But big data helps you find questions you don't even know to ask. So for example, Target didn't know that they were going to be able to find out who was pregnant before the families themselves knew who was pregnant. But the big data agglomerated everything and they found this amazing correlation between women who are pregnant and the products that they had been buying in the store, which might suggest they were pregnant, even long before they were buying diapers and other things that you would expect babies to need. And what they do is they take what's called unstructured data and they feed it from various sources into the system where it's accessed using the big data applications. And then the data is captured at the user level. And while we're not talking about it explicitly in this lecture, artificial intelligence is now being used to take a lot of this unstructured data and make sense of it and draw conclusions that we could never have drawn if it was just a bunch of people looking at this data. So big data is helping you find the questions you didn't know you even wanted to ask using unstructured data. And it's captured again at the interaction level very often. Not always, but very often. Business intelligence finds the answers to the questions you wanted to ask. That information is available, you know that it's available, you know where to get it and how to get it. So once you have big data, you've arrived at questions that you didn't know to ask, once you know you can ask those questions, then once you've asked those questions, you can use business intelligence to help you make sense of what big data helped you to uncover, if that makes sense. So know the difference between business intelligence and big data. Business intelligence happens at the transaction level. You go to McDonald's, you're buying a Big Mac and fries, that gets recorded, that's sent up to the big management in Chicago. They have that data. They look at all the stores throughout all their system all over the world, and they understand what's happening with big data and fries. They haven't understood what's happening with Big Macs and fries. With big data, they might be surprised to learn that people in the Philippines and people in Great Britain seem to react exactly to the same way by putting too much salt into the patties. You say, well, we never knew about that. Wow, what does that mean? Maybe we should change what we're doing with the salt in the Philippines and the United Kingdom. We never even knew to ask this question, but big data helped us uncover that. Once they uncover that, then they can say, okay, now we're going to pay attention to the salt content of our patties in Great Britain and the Philippines and see if it makes any difference. Okay, make sense? So what are challenges to big data? Well, first and foremost, it's a really new industry. And there are a lack of skilled people who know how to do anything with big data because it's such a new industry. Secondly, there are data governance issues. Should you have access to this data? Walmart has company secrets about what it's selling, how it's selling, to whom it's selling it. Should that be made public? Should people have access to that outside of Walmart? Or on a personal level, should Walmart have access to all the data that it has about you? You know, this is a big ongoing issue with Facebook. They know everything about you. because you allow them to take this information in return for allowing you to use Facebook for free. Now, maybe if they charge you $50 a month and they promise they would not use any of your information and sell it to vendors, you'd say that's a good deal, but would you want to spend $50 a month? Or are you willing to say, well, okay, there's nothing about my data that I'm really worried about. You can have it for free. As long as I don't have to pay for Facebook, go for it. And then there's the organizational readiness. A lot of companies don't know how to deal with big data. They don't know what to do once they have it in their hands. And that's because you have the lack of skilled staff. If you have skilled people who know what to do with it, then you might say the world is your oyster and you can do a lot of things with it. There's a whole issue surrounding the security of the data. And we can ask the questions, why is it important? What are technology and people-based threats to security? And how do you address some of these security threats? Because with that big data, it can become a monster. First of all, we have the increasing vulnerability of information resources. I don't know about you, but I've had my accounts hacked by illegal hackers somewhere in the world where they've stolen some of my information. I get a notification from my retailer or whoever it was selling me the product, say, gee, we're very sorry, but we were hacked and your information is now being sold on the dark web. It's not very reassuring, but it's going on all the time. And that's because we're all interconnected and there are all these cheap computers out there, massive storage devices, and it's not very difficult to be a hacker. The other big issue is organized crime has been taking over cybercrime. So you're probably aware of companies which are sent software, they open it up and it turns out that their drives have been essentially kidnapped, and unless they pay a ransom, they can't get their data and their information back. And so they have to pay a ransom. This has happened, I know, to a lot of state and local governments over the last few years. And generally, the ransoms aren't set out outrageous amounts of money. $15,000 to $30,000 might be a typical ransom that a local government may have to pay to get its data back. And the question is, are they willing to pay it? And often they say, well, rather than losing all of our data, it's worth the $15,000 to pay that ransom. It's unfortunate, but that's what's been going on. And also, there's a lack of management support. And one of the reasons for this lack of management support is they're just unaware. They just don't understand. A lot of management is filled with a bunch of old fogies like me. And the old fogies like me, so old fogies like me might not be willing to pay a whole lot of attention to things like the vulnerability of our systems to being taken over by organized crime. That's changing because companies are having class action suits set against them, and they're finding it's very expensive not to pay attention. And so over the last number of years, managers have gotten much more serious about paying attention to the vulnerability of their computer systems. We have the malware threats out there. And again, malware seeks to compromise a computing system without permission. You're all familiar with that. And there are various methods of infection: viruses, which affect our software files, the worms that take advantage of a security vulnerability to automatically spread, then the Trojans, which attempt to sneak in by masquerading as something they're not. These days, you can buy software, or Microsoft actually provides you software with Windows, and you can reasonably well protect yourself. I know, hopefully I'm not gonna, I should be knocking on wood, I haven't had any problems because of things that I've done to get viruses, worms, and Trojans. And I make sure that I keep my software up to date and that my hard drives are being scanned continuously. And again, there's the spyware, keylogger and screen things where they know what you're doing. We have that issue of the hackers. A hacker used to be a good name. Used to be good to be a hacker. A hacker was somebody who was adept at programming computers. So if you were a hacker, you'd say, ah, that's a smart guy, smart kid, knows how to program, or she knows how to program computers. Good for you, you'll get a good job someday. But that changed. And now a hacker is generally considered to be someone who breaks into computer systems illegally. There are white hat hackers. These are guys who are good guys, and they are actually paid to uncover computer weaknesses without doing the nasty things to exploit those weaknesses. So you'll hear that Apple and Google will be willing to pay the white hat hackers for finding faults, or Microsoft for finding faults with the software that they have out there. And again, it improves the system security. Then you have what we call the black hat hackers. Those are the bad guys. The black hat hackers are the computer criminals who exploit the system's weakness for personal gain. An example of that are those who are trying to do the ransom. You may be familiar or not, Sony made a very unfavorable movie about North Korea several years ago. And Kim Il-jung, the supreme leader of North Korea, got so upset with that he hired a whole band of black hat hackers who wiped out Sony's entire computer system. All the PCs had the drives compromised throughout the system, and it took them many months to rebuild that. Saudi Arabia also had the same thing happen. They think maybe it came from Iran, but Aramco, the Saudi Arabian oil company, had their drives wiped out by bad guy black hat hackers who the Saudis blamed was Iran. I don't know who it was, but that's what the Saudis were saying. So they can create havoc, serious havoc. Today, much of the data is encrypted, which is both good and bad. It's good that you can encrypt data so that people whose eyes shouldn't see the data don't have access to that data. But it's bad because bad guys who do bad things may have encrypted data, and it's often impossible to unlock the data encryption. And we've seen a few examples of that in recent years where terrorists have killed people and they've had iPhones on them at the time of when they've got shot and killed or been picked up for being terrorists. And the FBI has wanted to unlock the encrypted data that's on those iPhones. And they brought those iPhones to Apple, and Apple has said, no, we're not going to unlock that for you. We don't unencrypt encrypted data. That's just our policy. And the FBI has hemmed and hawed and threatened lawsuits and done everything they can, and Apple has said no. It's giving up. The FBI has said, okay, well, we'll find another way to do this. And what they've gone is gone to white hat hackers, the good guys, to hack into the Apple iOS phone system to unencrypt the encrypted data. And the white hackers have been happy to do that, but they've charged the FBI millions of dollars to unlock that data. Kind of interesting. The FBI doesn't brag about that, but Apple is steadfastly saying we will not unencrypt encrypted data. We will not do that. And under current U.S. law, they don't have to. Now, maybe they'll change the U.S. law at some point, but as it stands right now, they don't have to. The FBI has its sources who can do that, and they're willing to pay up to get important information unencrypted. You've probably seen certificates of authority sometimes when you've opened up software, and there's a trusted third party that authenticates that what you're seeing is truly encrypted, and the publisher, the user of the, or I should say, the software developer that you're entrusting your information with is authentic and not trying to masquerade as somebody else. So let's look at who are the big players in big data. Well, again, Walmart, Amazon, Apple. And for marketing purposes, they analyze the big data for marketing strategies, for new product development, product positioning, etc., just by mining the information and putting it through all kinds of algorithms and coming up with things that they did not know about. Now, who knows, maybe Steve Jobs came up with the idea of the iPhone by doing some analytical data analysis. Who knows, maybe he did that. Or maybe it was just an insight that he had. But the spending on analytics is growing dramatically, as exponentially as the amount of information is out there. And organizations are now paying a lot more attention to putting data to work to help them come up with innovative marketing ideas, innovative product ideas. And you can see some of this right now. 61% of the companies say that they're effective at analyzing the data, which is encouraging, but it's not 100%. There's still a lot of opportunity to do that. Now companies are relying more on analytics than on intuition or even experience to come up with ideas, because they realize that any single human being is not as capable of synthesizing all that data together and massive amounts of data together and coming up with particular insights. But using artificial intelligence and various algorithms, it is possible to pull all this data together and find that there are questions that you didn't know to ask that you should now ask. Move that over to business intelligence. And of course, you can see all these companies, both in Europe and the US, are saying that analytics are very important, and they are willing to spend to hire the people to do that. And here at Baruch, the marketing analytics teaches you to use analytics to target better customers and develop them to develop new products. So it's a big field here at Baruch. And I want to emphasize that there are tremendous opportunities for recent graduates. You don't need 3 to 5 years of experience. You can go in, find a job with the marketing analytic department of a company or an independent analytic company, consulting company, find jobs that pay very well. So if you are looking to find a job when you graduate, which has pretty good outlook, marketing analytics is probably a way to go. And you can talk to people in the marketing department about all of this. And you can see the most desirable skills include things like, again, pure analytics, mobile marketing, email marketing, content marketing, social media marketing. And this shows you the talent gap, meaning there are a lot of open positions for these kinds of jobs, and you don't have to have a whole lot of experience to secure these kinds of positions. So summarizing all of this, we compared the business intelligence to big data. One, questions you know to ask, that's business intelligence. Big data, questions you didn't know to ask, and suddenly you find relationships you weren't expecting. Once you know that, you can bring that back to business intelligence. We discussed the 4 V's of big data and the applications to big data analytics, the challenges of big data. We discussed the security. You have to secure your information. You have to understand the threats and know how to address those threats. And again, the opportunities, we say, are unlimited. Now we're going to totally switch, okay? This is the end of the marketing part. And what I'm going to discuss now, from this point forward, will not be on the next exam, this exam next week. This will be on our last exam, on our last exam, which will happen after the next 2 lectures. So this part of the lecture and the next 2 lectures will be tested on our final exam. None of what I'm going to talk about right now is going to be on next week's exam.
Wait, Professor?
Yeah?
For the test on Monday, are you gonna put out a review sheet?
I think I will. I'll try and do something similar to what I did last time.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Why don't we take, let's see, what time is it now? It's 1:37. Let's take a 5-minute break, okay? And we'll come back in 5 minutes, and then we'll continue. Sound good? So it is now, according to my clock, 1:37. Let's meet back here at 1:42. And we'll start talking about the management overview. So we're going to talk about management for the next 2.25 lectures because there's not that much time left here. And the first thing we're going to talk about are the basic forms of ownership. And there are 3 basic forms of ownership of businesses. There are the sole proprietorships, the partnerships, and the corporations. And most of the businesses in America today are sole proprietorships in terms of number. Those are the restaurants, those are your mom and pop bodega or a small dress shop. Most of those are sole proprietorships. And you can think of the guys who are being hammered most badly by closing down with the lockdown that we have. Those are generally sole proprietorships. Then you have another category called partnerships that we'll get into, and they're much smaller, only 8% with sales of about 13%. And then corporations, which we're all familiar with. Corporations are like General Motors Corporation, IBM Corporation, Apple Computer Corporation. These are corporations, and while they're small in number, they're 81% of the sales. So generally corporations are much larger. And there's a reason for that. So the sole proprietorship, they're easy to start. You just say one day, I'm in business. I'm going to go lease a store. I'm going to go buy some inventory. I'm going to hang up a sign, and bang, I'm in business. So you're your own boss. You're proud. You can tell all of your friends that you own your own business. You get to keep the profits, and there's no special taxes or anything. You pay taxes on whatever you earn. The disadvantages, and this is a big one, unlimited liability. What is unlimited liability? Supposing somebody comes into your store and they slip on a banana peel and they break their skulls and they die. A sad but unlikely outcome. So let me see if somebody else wants to come in. Okay, so that's a sad but unlikely outcome. That's unlimited. They sue you, or their families sue you, their heirs sue you for $5 million. Well, the judge decides in favor, and you owe the family $5 million. But you don't have $5 million. So you have a choice. You can go bankrupt, or you can pay them out over a period of time, $5 million for the rest of your life. So you have unlimited liability. If they sued you for $1 trillion, you'd have to pay them $1 trillion or go bankrupt. You'd have unlimited liability. That's a major disadvantage. A second major disadvantage is if you have limited access to financial resources. You can borrow from a bank, but that's about all you can do. You don't have any other sources of capital if you're just doing a sole proprietorship. It's difficult to attract talent because they say you're a one-person show. What if something happens to you? What if you get hit by a bus? What happens to our company? What are the opportunities for advancement? So if you're running a dress shop, for example, and you're the boss and you're the owner, salesperson comes in, what is my opportunity for advancement? Well, not very much, because I'm the boss and there's you. Time commitment, it takes a lot of time to run your own business. You have few fringe benefits. You can give yourself a pension, but it's difficult. Limited growth opportunities because you don't have access to capital. And the company itself might have a limited lifespan. When you decide to retire, unless you can sell it to somebody else, that's the end of it. So that's a sole proprietorship. Then we have partnerships. Partnerships are a little bit different. Partnerships, you go into business with partners, and all of them contribute some capital to the business. So as opposed to a sole proprietorship who might have to put up $100,000 to open up the dress shop, you can set up a partnership where each of the partners puts in $25,000 to set up the dress shop, and each of them will be entitled to a share of the profits, and each of those partners will pay their share of the taxes based on those profits. That's a general partnership. In this world today, and especially in the hedge fund industry where I was, we have what we call limited partnerships. And limited partnerships have what we call passive investors. Now, in a general partnership, the general partner can have unlimited liability. In a passive investor, in a limited partnership, the only person with unlimited liability is the general partner. The passive investors don't have unlimited liability because they're not making any decisions. So in a limited partnership, each of the partners may have put in $33,000 into the dress shop, and the general partner only put in $1,000. And the passive partners get to share in the profits of the dress shop. But if the general partner does something wrong and somebody dies and they have to pay $1 million out, that's the general partner's problem. The passive investor can never be asked to pay more than was initially invested into the limited partnership. So you have general partners who have unlimited liability, And then you have what we call limited partnerships, where the limited partners, the passive investors, have no liability except for the money that they initially put in. But the general partner, this guy here, he continues to have unlimited liability. So he's on the hook. So you might say, why would I want to go into a structure where I have unlimited liability and I either have to go bankrupt or bankrupt myself as I have to pay these massive payouts? That doesn't seem like a good deal. Why would I want to do that? And the answer is because it's pretty easy to set up the partnerships as well. And if you're a passive investor, you don't care. So the advantages of a partnership is you have more financial resources because you can bring in a lot of partners with you. You can have your partners share the management. So a lot of law firms, for example, are partnerships, general partnerships. You have 100 lawyers, and all those lawyers, you might have 300 lawyers, but only 100 are partners because that's a very advantageous position to be in. You all share in the management of the company. The partnership can last decades because if one partner dies, another partner can come in and buy out that partner's share. There are no special taxes, just your own personal income taxes. The disadvantage is, again, the unlimited liability. I put that in red because that's a major issue. How are you going to divide the profits? So you have to decide among the partners who gets what percentage of the profits. So you might find the original partners get most of the profits and the newer partners get a much smaller amount of the profits. You have disagreements among partners and you have to figure out how to handle those disagreements, manage those disagreements. And partnerships are difficult to terminate. You don't just say, I'm closing the doors and that's it, which is what a sole proprietorship can do. You have to deal with your partners and you have to figure out how to unwind this whole thing. Then you have corporations. Now, corporations are quite attractive because if you notice, there's no red that says unlimited liability. They have what we call limited liability. Maybe I should put that in red, limited liability or blue, which means that only the money that you've invested in the company can be taken away from you. People can't go up after you for any more than you've already invested, just like the passive investor in a general partnership. Another benefit of a corporation is you can get many more investors coming into a corporation much more easily. And you can make a separation between the ownership and management of a corporation. So you have the shareholders or members of a corporation who are just investors and have no role in management. It's kind of like a limited partnership in that respect, where you can have people who have just invested their money to participate in the profits, but they're not involved at all in the management of the company. And generally with a corporation, it's easy to change ownership. You can sell your shares in the company to somebody else or sell your stake in the company to somebody else. And these can go on forever and ever and ever. And corporations can, by the nature of their ability to attract resources, can have much larger size. The disadvantages, so they say, is initial cost, paperwork. You know, I've set up a number of corporations and it's not very hard to do. The initial paperwork costs are not very high. You can go to zoom.com and set up a corporation for under $200 and get everything done that you have to do. One of the major differences between a corporation and the limited partnership and a proprietorship, however, are that you have two tax returns. You have the corporation pays its own taxes, whereas you, the individual, pay your taxes on your own income. So corporation earns a profit, they pay taxes on that profit. Unless they give you a dividend, you don't have to pay taxes on what the corporation has earned, you just pay your own individual taxes. However, if they pay a dividend, you may be asked to pay taxes on that dividend. Or depending on the type of corporation that you have, the corporation itself may not pay taxes and just flow whatever they earn to you personally, just like a proprietorship would do or a partnership would do. So you would have to pay taxes on whatever you earn from the corporation and your own individual businesses that you're doing, your own individual income. You'd have to pay that as your own individual income, that sum total as your own individual income. You wouldn't get too hung up on that. It's hard to end a company, but it can be done. Companies terminate all the time. They wind themselves up. You can have stockholder and board conflict. There's a board of directors, which advises the company what to do. And if you're a passive shareholder, you might not like the decisions that the board of directors is suggesting that management do. You might have a fight with them. You can have double taxation, we talk about, where you're paying tax both on your own individual income and the corporation dividends that you're paying tax on. But I won't get hung up on that either. So the important things is the limited liability issue. You can raise more money. You have the separation of ownership and management. It can be much larger. And the other issues that you would really worry about would be the stockholder and board conflict.
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you said termination is difficult, what do you mean?
Well, if you want to end the company, say our company is going to stop business and we're going to die today, there's a process that you have to go through to do that. And that's why I said don't get hung up on it, because it's not that important in the overall discussion. But there is a process that you have to go through with your director, with the government agencies, with the tax authorities. It's a whole process. But just like the paperwork, it isn't that difficult to start a company. To terminate a company, it isn't easy, but it's certainly doable, especially if you're a large company and you have the resources to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Now take a look at the management pyramid here, and we'll look at this management period a few times in this lecture and the next lecture. At the very top, you have the owners, who are the stockholders, the shareholders of a company. So, if you wanted to buy shares in IBM, you could go to the market and you can buy shares in the IBM, and you're now a shareholder of IBM. And you have a right to vote on who the directors of IBM will be. You buy one share of IBM for $200, $300, whatever the shares are trading for right now. That gives you a right to vote for a director of IBM. The directors at IBM are the guys who really dictate what goes on in the company. They hire the officers. So they will hire the president of the company, and generally they'll have a strong role in hiring the chief financial officer and some of the top other managers of the company. And the managers, the officers are in charge of hiring the managers and supervising the managers, and the managers are in charge of supervising the employees. But I'm more concerned right now with the owners and the stockholders and the board of directors to whom they've elected, and the role of the board of directors to essentially approve what the officers are doing. And if they don't like what the officers are doing, they can fire them. So you'll see all the time boards of directors are firing the managers. Now, there's a conflict because often the directors get ridiculously highly paid for going to 4 board meetings every year. And they like having that kind of a life. And they know that they are appointed to the board, in theory, by other members of the board of directors, but generally by the chief executive officer, the president of the company, who says, I've got a good buddy and I'd like to put my good buddy on the board of directors. So the board of directors, in theory, is supposed to be independent, but he's not always independent, or she's not always independent. And so you might get decisions that are made that are not necessarily in the best interest of the owners and the stockholders, and are more in the interest of the officers of the corporation. And you see that coming up all the time with compensation. When we say that the president of the company is receiving absurd levels of compensation, well, that's because the board of directors are generally friendly with the president of the company, and they don't want to have problems with the president of the company, because the president of the company might make problems for a particular director who doesn't approve with the other directors and have that director tossed off the board. So there's some conflicts that are there, and that's had some serious impact on what's going on at corporations. And that, my friends, ends today's lecture. So if you have any questions, let me know right now, because we've got a few minutes.
You own a majority share of the stock in a company. Can the board vote you off, even if you're in that decision majority?
If you own a majority of the shares of the company, the board cannot vote you off. Also, sometimes you'll find, like in the case of Facebook, there are two classes of shares. One class of shares might own 90% of the stock, and that's owned by the founder of the company, like Zuckerberg. And the other share might be all the owners of the company, all the other 90% of the owners of the company, who have only 10% of the voting rights. So one person might have 90% of the voting rights, everybody else might have 10% of the voting rights, so that really that large shareholder has absolute control over the company. So you have to, when you're buying a company, investing in a company, you might want to look at that and see, are there different classes of shares, and can poor decisions made by the person who controls the class of shares result in my stock that I own going down in value.
Oh yeah, you'll give us the code for today.
Okay. The code for today is Horatio. Horatio. Horatio.
Will you be uploading this to YouTube?
Yes, I will upload this to YouTube.
Can you say that again
after
one more
this,
time?
probably.
Put it in the chat. H-O.
Horatio. Horatio.
Thank you.
Professor.
Yeah.
There isn't a discussion board up on it.
Yeah.
What's with this, Pastor? This has nothing to do with today's lesson at all today. That the code.
Well, Horatio Alger was a person who went from rags to riches.
Oh.
So that's the only reason. That's the only reason I put it up there.
But it's showing up as a discussion board instead of a verification, and I can't seem to create a thread for it.
Oh, I didn't put up verification yet. You have until Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. So
Okay.
I'll put up the verification.
Thank you.
Professor,
Yeah.
so the questions are generated by you for the next exam, or is it just
Yeah.
taking
by
it
me.
off,
They're my questions.
but they're just going to be on Blackboard?
Yeah, it's going to be on Blackboard. So I'll send out an email with a discussion about that before the exam. But
right.
essentially, you log on like you did last time, the course content, and you'll see it at the bottom, I think, and it'll be deployed.
Are we gonna have a Zoom during the test?
I probably keep Zoom on. I think I can do that if people want to have access to Zoom. So if you have questions, I can answer questions.
And we have the time limit of the class to
Yeah,
finish
time
the
limit
exam?
with the class.
I don't see anything on the attendance verification.
Yeah, I didn't put it up yet. I will.
Wait.
Yeah, I'll put it up there. Okay, any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, you all have a
Professor, take
good
care.
week, and I'll send just check.
Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Professor. Take care.